Welcome to Her Lights, your home for women's sports coverage. I'm your host, Erin Foley, a stand-up comic, TV writer, and most important, an obsessed sports fan. I break down the best games, highlight the best stories, and interview the best from the world of women's sports. So put on your jerseys, stretch out your hammies, and let's do this. Hello, Her Lighters. It's Erin Foley back in the booth talking women's sports. So fired up to be here today. Happy Pride, happy June, happy summer. I hope you're getting out of the house and enjoying, I don't know, the beach, a gin and tonic, women's sports. Go watch a game when you're not hopefully protesting or just shutting out the world in general because it's an absolute shit show. But just sending you lots of love. And I know the news is pretty grim right now. But listen, we all got to band together and just support each other and support all these marginalized communities that are being attacked. And one way to do that is, to get involved and just stay informed, but also just take care of yourself and do things that bring you joy. And for me, it's talking about women's sports and slinging jokes. So on that note, if you're in the greater New York City area, I will be at City Winery in New York City telling jokes Tuesday, July 1st. That is next week. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Tuesday, July 1st, City Winery, New York City. If you're in Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, I don't know, Georgia, take a train. It's going to be, we need laughter, we need joy. And you know who's going to be in the crowd that night is my guest today, Jane McManus. Can you stand it? I can't. I'm sitting down. I'm bringing that one back. Jane McManus. I've been a fan of her work. She's an amazing journalist, ESPN, one of the original writers for espnW. She was a columnist for the groundbreaking espnW series. She has covered, she worked for ESPN for over a decade. She is a professor at NYU. I mean, she really, honestly, her resume is absolutely incredible. And she just wrote a book, and that's why we're here today. She just wrote a book called The Fast Track: Inside the Surging Business of Women's Sports. It is absolutely fantastic. We're going to break it all down. I'll intro it in 2 seconds, and then we're going to spend the majority of the time on the podcast today talking about it. It's just absolutely, I cannot recommend it enough. But I want to backtrack and tell you the story of how I met her. And last podcast, you'll recall me talking about how I just had this feeling in the fall of 2024 that I wanted to go to the Final Four in Tampa. And that's when I met all these amazing people, including Shay Ralph, my guest last week. But my guest this week, Jane, I met at the Final Four. I don't know why. I have a lot of good luck, good fortune, whatever you want to call it. So let's back this up. How I got there, my fantastic manager, who also in a dream sequence, her and her husband make up Green Olive Entertainment. They produce this podcast. She got me, through her magical powers, a press pass for this event. And I've never had a press pass for any event. So it's a long story. We're going to make it real quick. So I was really nervous, right? I'm like, oh my God, it's a Final Four. I'm covering it. I have a press pass. I honestly didn't even really know like what that meant and where I'd be sitting. I had no idea. So you pick up the credentials like during the day, right? Before. So Friday there was the semifinals, the two semifinals, and then Sunday is the final. So I pick up the press pass, right? And you're allowed to bring a bag in. So, cause I had my laptop, I didn't know, I had a notebook and a pen. I had no idea what I was doing, right? Which is so fun. Just to literally, I was swimming outside my comfort zone. I was honestly sweating, but also because it was 950 degrees in Tampa. So I go into the stadium and they give me the press pass credential. And they're like, I wasn't sure like where to go. And someone directs me. And when I'm telling you, you go all the way up. And when I say all the way up, I'm talking above the last row of seats of fans. Into this small little like press box area. Now there's different areas of the stadium for like high-end press. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's like, courtside press. I am not on the level of courtside press. So I'm up in the nosebleeds. But when I say nosebleeds, I mean, it was the rafters. I was looking down at the Jumbotron, and it was making me laugh so hard. So because nobody would make eye contact with me, not everyone, like everyone was just kind of like looking down or on their phones. And I just was like, okay, this is like a real buzzkill, but also just so happy to be there that I had a press pass and I could like walk around and see all these different parts of the stadium. But it was just like kind of like I felt like a little fish out of water. So at the same point in time, I don't really know anybody who's there. I knew a couple people, but one person I did know was Sarah Spain. And you've heard me talk about her on the show. She's been a guest on the show. She has a daily podcast called The Good Game with Sarah Spain. It is women's sports magic. And she is, just an absolute pro and just like really cool person. So I'm on this text thread, and sometimes you're on a text thread where like one person, then it's just like a series of numbers. Like I didn't know anybody else on the text thread. I knew one other person, Renee Steps, who's been a guest on the show. I know, she was a former professional tennis player. Anyway, so they're all talking about where they're sitting, right? And they're all like rock stars. So they're like, I'm in this suite. I'm in section, on the court section 2. And because I'm joking around constantly. I took a snapshot, I took a photo of how high I was. And was basically, you couldn't get higher. And I wrote on the first text, like, I don't want to brag, but this is the view from the press box. And then I said, if anything happens in the ceiling, I have it covered, right? So I don't know. I don't know who's on this text thread, but apparently it was all these ESPNW people, like high-ranking ESPNW people and writers and Sarah Spain and Renee, whatever. So, of course, I'm like joking around. And Sarah being like just an absolute, just wonderful human. She was like, listen, Foley, there's a seat next to me in section blah, blah, blah. And I said, all right, well, I'll be up here because by the time I even got down to to the stadium floor, it would have been an hour and a half. So then she follows up with a couple other people. She's like, listen, everybody meet at the ESPNW suite. Just like keep your head down and, nobody's going to, I don't know. I had this press pass credential, so nobody looked at me like twice. So again, so thankful. So I go down to the ESPN suite at halftime and I go in and it's like the who's who. It was amazing just to be in everybody's company. Like, it was like all these, the people that run ESPNW and ball players and writers and all this stuff. And I'm, trying to make small talk, but just like nerd women's sports. I'm in heaven, right? Also, I don't know anybody. So of course I had to drink immediately. Anyway, so the long and short of it is either during the first game or the second game, they were both blowouts, unfortunately. I get introduced to Jane McManus. Now, I know her. She doesn't obviously know me from a hole in the wall, but I've been following her writing, of course, for like a decade, right? So I'm so fired up to meet her. And the book had just come out, which I didn't know, And so we were talking about her book. We wound up sitting next to each other and we watched the entire game together. And it was just like I had known her for like 40 years. Like she was so easy to talk to. She was so welcoming and just funny and just like whip smart. And I just absolutely loved her immediately. So then Saturday night, we wound up going to a whole bunch of events together. We wound up having too many cocktails on the dance floor at the together party. Like just loved her, just absolutely loved her. I need to be friends with her forever. So anyway, that's how I met her. That's why we're here. And so then I go home and order her book. And I don't want to give too much away because we're going to talk about in the interview that you're, conversation. I like conversation better than interview that you're going to hear in a couple of minutes. But I'm not just saying this. The book is just really incredible. It's like the kitchen sink of women's sports. It's like history and culture, society, all of it just like wrapped up in such a beautiful package. It was so easy to read. I'm just going to just briefly tell you a couple of the subjects that she tackles. Upward trends and forces that have held women's sports back since the 70s, Title IX, pioneering sponsorships, broadcast opportunities, surges in ratings, racial inclusivity, transgender athletes, women's health issues, equal pay. I mean, she did it all, which we will break down and we're going to talk you through all of this. But you have to get this book, you guys. You will absolutely love it. You can be on at any point of women's sports spectrum. You can have just started. You could have just found this podcast. You could have just watched your first WNBA game, or you could be like me, like an insane super fan that has, just an encyclopedia. Just, it's too much. I know and love all of it. So whatever fandom you're on, this book is for you. And just think of this podcast today as just like this awesome opportunity to meet Jane. You'll get her personality right away. She was so well spoken. I mean, she's a professor, but just like a cool, awesome, amazing, like tour de force in life, and in particular, such a champion of women's sports. Buy the book immediately. The Fast Track Inside the Surging Business of Women's Sports. Listen, I know I say it probably a little bit too much, but you're going to love her and you're going to love the book. So without further ado, let's jump in. Let's do this. Well, this isn't a shocker. I absolutely love the book. I knew duh. Like I knew I was going to love it because I've been following your writing since, I was trying to think of back when I first kind of discovered you, and it must have been ESPNW days, like all your columns from ESPNW. That was like, what was that, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago?
A lifetime ago. No, it was 2010 was when they started ESPNW. So that's when we started writing columns and doing reporting around that. But yeah, it's been a while. I was actually thinking about this too because that's 15 years ago, it's a long time. And I was hired as the veteran reporter, I was the wizened, grizzly old, gal of the bunch. So that's really a long time for me. But yeah, it's been 15 years and we had such a great run, especially in those first early days, like the first 5 years of it, we were like hitting on all cylinders and doing some good stuff. And really, we're kind of allowed to explore that idea of voice and to, what's your voice in sports? And that was like a whole revolutionary concept, honestly, because I think, in some ways I'd really been kind of parroting a voice I thought you were supposed to have in sports, and then kind of realized, oh, well, what would my voice sound like if it were just mine and I were saying what I wanted to say? And that was like a whole new thing, honestly.
It seems crazy that sort of happened because although listen, to this day everyone's just like, at least writing still with stand-up reporting, it's like, what's your voice, and like young comics are like, I'm just trying to figure out my voice. I'm like, well, strap in, it's gonna take some time. You can't hit the stage or start writing and be like, nailed it, that's who I
Yeah,
am. I
exactly.
mean, it takes time.
Just, one take Sally. That's all it is. All it is. Get
You write
in
your
there.
first column, nailed
Yeah,
it, boom.
exactly right. Exactly right. I'll write 10 more. I got it down.
Here we
No
go.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're already on your desk. Boom. Well, the book just was. I love First of all, the book was so comprehensive, right? Dare I say, meaty. It was so great. I mean, the topics. First of all, these are just a couple, listeners, and I'll be talking about the book in the intro. But you're covering pay equity, body autonomy, broadcasting, past, present, future, partnering with people who share the same values, negotiating value, right, through this historical, political, cultural lens. But here's the kicker: it was fun to read. It was There was like a flow. There was, obviously your voice that you've developed over a course of a lifetime. But that's honestly not always the case, with so much information and historical knowledge and story. But, just having that striking that balance of fun and smooth and a page turner versus all the knowledge that comes out. And I thought you just nailed it.
Oh God, I love you so much. That's so nice to hear. Because that was the thing. Like, I think I pitched this book to a lot of people and they were kind of like, "Oh, that sounds like a lot." Or you can really get to all that.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna try." I mean, like, I think, I should be able to do it. But, there was a lot of like, well, hey, isn't there just like one plucky gal you can tell this story through? Like somebody who broke through the glass ceiling and we'll just leave it at that. And I was kind of like, no, no, there's a lot more there. There's a lot that's happened. And Yeah, I agree. It was really tough. And I tried to get to each of those kind of concepts through somebody, like through a person. Like here's what somebody did and why they needed to do it. And here's why it hadn't been done before, or it had been done before and it failed before. And so somebody else is coming up and realizes it has to be done. I think, you know, we tend to tell stories through the winners. We tend to want to only tell, plucky stories and optimistic stories. I feel like, I mean, that's something that I've certainly encountered my entire career has been, especially in the space around women's sports. It's been like, listen, we can't scare people with how hard things are. So we really have to find like happy ways to tell happy stories around women's sports. And I was always kind of like, well, there are lots of happy stories, so that's easy. But occasionally I would like to tell the truth as well. So, but yeah, so I kind of like just decided to like tell it all, tell the truth, and to report it out, and to, this book may not be for everybody. I'm so glad. I mean, I do think it really meet like people who care deeply about it. They're the audience around women's sports really cares about equity. And they understand what these issues are, right? Because they've either gone through themselves or they've seen athletes have to go through it, or they've heard conversations with their friends, pushback about, well, I watched the Liberty game last night. Oh, you watched the Liberty game? Shut up, or whatever. Like, you hear it in your
Enraged.
own,
Yeah.
right. Like you hear it in your own life, the pushback. And so I felt like it was probably an audience that could take the truth.
Yeah, well, it was really interesting. There was one, I think it was in the intro. It said, I'm going to quote you here. Hold on. It says, it's time to take a larger focus beyond individual stories on of adversity and systems of advancement. And I love that it wasn't a story of a plucky individual because you could still weave those points in through, name the athlete that everybody knows. But that was obviously a particular choice, pulling out and taking a deep dive on the systematic issues. Was that, really at the forefront when you decided to write this?
Yeah, 100%. And that's what, and actually, like one of the first working titles was Gatekeepers because I thought, because I'd just seen so many ways like programming around women's sports, storytelling, whatever had been redirected, let's say, to be kind, over the years. And I think, funding and also like all different ways of looking at it, kind of how it wasn't talked about the way that you talk about men's sports. And I felt like, there's nothing sexier than pitching a book about systems. People love that. Um, but at the same time, I felt like it was important to lay it out at the beginning, um, because the current moment where we are, you know, progress isn't a given. And I wanted to make sure that we at least are able to identify and name what the conditions are, because so much of it has to do with not who you are. I kind of came into sports writing and I was like, I'm here because I'm an athlete. Like people are going to get that. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, I'm being treated like I'm a woman first and not an athlete first, or that I'm not here because I'm a fan and love sports and all of that. And I just kind of was like, oh, I can't reach escape velocity on some of these things by myself. And I think that's important to realize also, because I think sometimes you might be like, oh, what did I do wrong? Was it something that I should have done differently? And sometimes it's just no, you're just kind of up against, or you're in a system where you really can't. And so I think being aware of that though makes it a little bit easier, honestly.
Yeah, it's also when people used to say, well, they still do, but a couple years ago, it was just more probably in my face of just like nobody watches WNBA. It doesn't make
Yeah.
any money. I'd say this because this is my impression of a straight man. That's just naturally flowing out of me. But literally, I was in these conversations for so long of just like, if it wasn't for the NBA, they're just like putting this product out because they have to, blah blah blah, and your my immediate response is like, well, first of all, go fuck yourself. But like my I'm trying to like also my blood, starts to boil, but I'm like, there isn't one, I can't come back at you and go,
Yeah.
okay, well, do you want to actually sit down and have a conversation that systematically this is set up to fail? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's just like these trigger, like, there's not enough, nobody goes, and but it doesn't make any money, and they kept coming
Yeah.
back, it doesn't make any money. And I'm like, well, do you really want to have a conversation about this? Because this is the whole point of it's the system.
Well, how many times like I mean I remember like when I was like a young NBA fan, and I would sit and I'd talk about, the NBA, and I'd play, I was a big basketball player, and I was, loved, obviously got into sports because I loved basketball. And then people would like say to me though, well, but women don't really care about sports. And I mean, and I'd be like, are you not speaking to, am I, like, is there someone behind me? Like, I'm just telling you how much I like sports. And instead I'd get this kind of story. It was like, well, you don't really matter and no one else like you likes it. And I would just be kind of like, how is it that it's so easy to just completely discount, my the person you're speaking to, and like what I am telling you. And and I wasn't the only woman that I knew who loved sports. But it was easy. I felt like those conversations you're talking about are really to kind of just shut you up. They're not actually based on anything. They just are kind of like, well, I don't really want to talk about it or think about it, so that's my response.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like one on one. It's like if he was approaching me and I had like 20,000 women behind me, would that be a valid, just like my one, oh, well, I go to games. And then he was just, yeah, but he just represents it's just one of these things where you're just like, it's not a quick answer of what women have been up against systematically since day one. And I thought your book did such an incredible job of laying all of that out. And also, like, look what we've overcome, and look what, we still obviously have a long way to go, and we'll get to that. Besides the actual horror of sitting down and writing something, and that could just be my
No,
anxiety
it's
when I
hard.
have to write anything, was it enjoyable? Like, were there parts that flowed and parts that were, pulling teeth? Like, tell us about the process.
Yeah, so the process was interesting. First of all, I just called everybody I know who I knew had done research or played a part, So a lot of it was like talking to Val Ackerman, or, going back through old podcast recordings for the ladies' room that I did with Julie DeCaro, and, going back over conversations that we'd had like with Swin Cash, or Stacey Allister, or all of these people who have a lot of like knowledge in the space, and that and just being like getting that, hearing the same stories kind of told in different anecdotes over and over again, and and then trying to just kind of connect the dots. So to keep some of the chunks for individual storytellings, like so those anecdotal leads, like with Nadia Rawlinson at the Sky, and talking about kind of her experience of somebody being, talking about value and what does it mean to have value. And he's like, no, no, you're thinking Mark Lazary. She was having a conversation with Mark Lazary, and he said, no, no, you have to think about it differently. You're a Warhol.
I
You
love
need
that
some
part.
value like you're a Warhol. And so wait, so you need to work with the people who are thinking you're a Warhol. And I was like, this is such a great anecdote, and so like writing it was kind of I was just trying to kind of compartmentalize everything, because it felt like such a, like what you're talking about and what publishers would tell me was it's like it's such a wide-ranging story, like the history of women's sports, past, present, and future, within 200 pages, but trying to really just get at the nut of it, to get the something that's going to make it readable, like what you're talking about. Like your response to it is like my dream of, if only I'd heard what your response to it was, when I was midway through the writing process, I would have slept better. But really, it's trying to give somebody a reason to care, an introduction to people who matter, and then also like this, it's not a one-off. It's not that people are not in a vacuum. People are all agitating in these different ways and facing the same kind of pushback. And here's how somebody overcame over here. Here's what worked over there. Here's what's changing over there. So kind of trying to tell that. But yeah, it's writing a book is a nightmare. Kate Fagan and Sarah Spain were both writing books at the same time. My fellow trifecta, we did a radio show together for former ESPN people. And so it was kind of like, it was just interesting that we were all kind of embarking on these like big projects, kind of outside of our wheelhouse a little bit. Um, Kate's written a book before, but this was her first fiction book. So, we were all kind of, but the writing process is arduous, and I thought it was going to be easy because I'm like, oh, I'm a writer, I write columns, and I have a voice. I finally have a voice. And and it was really hard. It was really hard. And like people don't, you're not going to get rich off writing a book about women's sports. But I felt like I had no choice but to write this, because I really felt like So many stories are being told through the lens of Caitlin Clark, which is great. But, Caitlin's a beneficiary of all the work that had been done before. She's not the reason for the moment we're having. And I feel like it's real important to be able to distinguish that.
Oh, well, absolutely. Where were you, like the timing of this book? Like, where were you at in your life where you're like, okay, let's do this because it's obviously quite an undertaking.
Yeah, so I was in part of a layoff in 2017 from ESPN, and they gave me a year left on my deal. I had a year left on my deal and a non-compete, so I couldn't work elsewhere or do anything for a year. And so I convinced my husband to move with me and my two daughters to London for 2 years. So we lived there, and that was kind of where I was like, you know what, I should write a book, and I got a lot of like things like, oh, if you're going to write a sports book, make sure it could sell on Father's Day because that's really the market. And I was like,
Oh
oh, I
my
don't think
God.
I don't really think I want to write a book for Father's Day. That's not the kind of book I'm going to be
Where's the
writing.
London Bridge again? Can I just
Right.
hurl myself off of it?
Exactly. But I mean, that is the thing. Like I
Wow.
was facing the same thing in the publishing space that I was going to be talking about in the context of this book. So that's challenging. But yeah, but that's kind of where I got the idea for it. And then I moved back in 2019 to take a job at Marist College as the then college, now university, as the director of their Center for Sports Communication. And that's really where, I got an agent and I really started sitting down and thinking about these things. At that time, I was doing the podcast with Julie DeCaro, and we were having these incredible conversations with Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe and like, all of these people who really matter in sports and have had a lot of things to say. And so, and then I was having like, Terry Jackson, the head of the WNBA Players Association, came and did a couple events at Marist, and just so impressive and so impressed with what she had to say. And so I was really starting to just think, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write this. I'm going to sit, and so my agent and I worked together on the proposal and, finally got it picked up. But it was 2020 when I really started pitching this book, and so it was, I just kind of saw things, some things starting to change about the conversation. The pay equity thing I thought was pretty huge, when it came to the U.S. women's national team. The way that conversation was happening, the fact that they continued to sell out of jerseys, 10 minutes after they were put on sale, meaning that they weren't making enough jerseys to meet the market. Like the market was constantly being underestimated over and over again. Still is in a lot of ways. I just saw one of the I think the Asia Wilson's sneaker just sold out as soon as it was put on sale. And it was like, well, that's probably because they didn't make enough sneakers because they underestimated
Yeah.
the demand in the marketplace. It's not a great, and that's tough because then that's, that you got to wait for the shoes to be manufactured again. That's money that's left on the table in some ways. But yeah, so that was 2020 was really when I started sitting down and being like, okay, this is a story that needs to be told, and I'm going to tell it.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm so glad you did because it really, I look like, this is women's sports has been my interest since I was like, a child. And there were so many moments where I didn't even, and I feel like fairly nerdily informed. And I was like, oh my God, like you had just mentioned about the women's national team, the selling out of the jersey in 2019. And that was just one story where I flagged where I was like, if I have time, I just wanted to let's just do this real quick because that section I was like I had no idea that they had negotiated. If you could just like kind of talk us through that, their individual whatever was licensing agreement in
Yeah.
2010 or no, sorry, 2017 with the NFL.
Right. So right. Because so the jerseys that sold out were the official team jerseys. So those were the ones that US Soccer had manufactured. Um, Separate to that, the US Women's National Team Player Association and the WNBA Player Association had actually negotiated deals with I think it's called Player Rep, is the NFL company that does like outside of there are certain licensing that happens outside of the family of the CBA kind of. So like any sort of official NFL merchandise, any official NWSL merchandise, any official WNBA merchandise, that's part of that CBA. But you can go around that to license other stuff. So you can get the licensing for your own line of apparel or something like that. So that's what U.S. Women's National Team did. And that's what the WNBA did because they felt like there was so much money being left on the table by leagues not maximizing the value in those rights deals. And so, for example, I don't know if you remember, but in 2020, there were T-shirts that said like Bird Rapinoe 2020,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
campaign, like T-shirts that were so funny. I mean, if you like that sort of thing, if you like
I
to
was
laugh
like,
at
I'll
politics,
take 10. Yeah. That was
exactly.
just chef's kiss on that t-shirt. Yeah.
So exactly. So kind of cheeky, like the kind of thing that the WNBA front office might not be like, we should really do this because the NBA is lobbying, Washington all the time. The NFL is lobbying Washington all the time. Like so those official entities, they could, they might come up against a senator or, somebody who is none too happy with, them poking fun at whatever campaign is being run on one side or another. So, but that is something that the players can do. And players, have a funny sense of humor. Everyone watches women's sports. That's not an official jersey that came out of a league or a CBA negotiation. That's, something that Together did separately as a way of, again, finding that market. So I believe it was Deloitte, perhaps, or Sports Innovation Lab, somebody that's doing a lot with that number, with generating numbers, found that I think it was 4 billion is the amount left on the table in the women's sports merchandise market.
Wow.
Right. And so it's like, so the reason that everyone watches women's sports as a t-shirt can take off like it did is because that market has not been met in the way that it needs to be. And I think, fans of women's sports are a little bit different. They're, you know, have a sense of humor, she said to a stand-up comic. They're like, they have a cheeky sense of humor. It's kind of a bit rebellious. It's like, it's always been like a bit, you realize kind of the world that you live in when you like women's sports because certain things are just absolutely ridiculous. And so, you can kind of have a sense of humor about that kind of and I think that can, that I remember when I played roller derby, we had like this fabulous artwork, that was like really kind of bold and interesting. And that artwork was all over on roller derby posters and t-shirts. And I loved going and buying those t-shirts because it just had that sensibility. And so meeting that fan base with a product that kind of speaks to them is really important. And it's something that hasn't been done in women's sports nearly enough.
Yeah. And all of us want to buy it. I mean, I did wear this shirt just because it felt appropriate. Listeners, I'm wearing, everybody watches women's sports because I think it's also just so, if I have to buy like another men's size something that says like, any type of like WNBA or any type of women's league in sort of an off-putting wide
Right.
ass men's whatever, like you're just like so sick of it. You're just like so wanting something that fits, that looks, not like that like a tent with like a belt around it that supports your team. So that doesn't surprise 4 billion. I mean, that's actually horrifying, but also really exciting. You know what I mean? It just feels
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it's kind of hopeful, but also upsetting, which I think explains all of women's sports.
Which is exactly what the book is. Hopeful but upsetting. I
Okay,
hope I've hit.
let's get to a couple hopeful. The last two things I'm doing are hopeful and upsetting. What I want to do is talk to you about the chapter on the body, which was my favorite chapter, and then one hopeful and then one possibly upsetting. um,
Got it.
no, that chapter in particular, just dealing, because that really spoke to me because whenever I was playing sports growing up and through college, it was such a battle. Like everyone always would ask me, like, oh, was it really hard being gay or coming out or, doing stand up when you're gay? And I'm like, yeah, it was hard enough, whatever. But the struggle was really this identification of like trying to be feminine, and trying to balance me being on the court or on the field and feeling the best I've ever felt in my life and the most confident and the most self-assured. And then it's like, oh, stick this bow in your hair. And you're like, I can't. Like it was so difficult still to this day. This
What
is
did
why
you
when
play?
oh, I played everything. I played softball, soccer. My main sport was basketball. I played in high school and I played in college.
Okay, okay.
Um, I mean
So I see
D3,
what you mean
nothing
about
to
the
write.
bow in the hair. No, listen,
It's very
let-
triggering during the
do not,
softball
do not,
playoffs.
Okay, don't say anything, never downplay your own athletic achievements. That's
Yeah,
something that
that's
I've learned.
true. It's
Okay.
D3 powerhouse. Although my coach did think she was Pat Summit, and we were like, we're not on scholarship. But she was kind of a lunatic, but I absolutely loved it, and I think that's just, propelled, I don't know, my entire career. But that
100%.
that that chapter, hold on, I just want to read a couple of things because it was so interesting. And some of it obviously, but the way you wrote it was so great. It said, this first one, you cannot understand the opposition women have faced as athletes until you look at the way women's bodies have been treated and why choosing to play professional sports has been a radical act. That's when I slam dunked the book. I just threw it on the floor and did my own touchdown celebration. I was like, God, I need to be friends with her for the rest of my life. Um,
Done.
Writing this chapter, I obviously, I'm sure, was difficult because it's so infuriating, but it's also just so interesting. Why did you feel like obviously the need to put all of that in? And I'm not done. There's another quote, but like I want you to start talking about this.
Yeah, so actually that chapter wasn't in the original pitch for the book. And it wasn't until I actually started really thinking and organizing, I was like, I cannot tell this story without having something like that in there. It's not, the others are kind of like more, you know, money focused just because, we're a capitalist society. And so, of course, we're going to organize everything around revenue and principles of economics. Okay, fine, I'll do it. But at the same time, I really wanted to, I just felt like you cannot talk about women's sports and everybody says, oh, you've overcome adversity without naming the adversity. And a lot of it is the adversity to traditional gender roles and the fact that women's bodies have never been seen as competitive or sporting or useful or benefit or valuable in that regard. And so really from the moment you put on a pair of sneakers, as a little girl, that you're facing that mountain of opposition. That's the adversity. And so I just felt like it was important to name that, but also it impacts everybody differently. If you're, a Black woman, it impacts you differently. If you're gay, if you're trans, if you're anything that is then a subcategory of, then you're being impacted, poor. And like all of these things are going to change your acceptance, relative acceptance level. And I just felt it was really important to think of. And that's why I love talking to Amira Rose Davis. The things that she was able to say were, so she's a professor was at UT, and she is
She's a rock
absolutely
star.
brilliant. She's
Yeah.
brilliant, exactly. And really kind of like has looked at this through the prism of color as well. And her insights are, incredible. And you should read everything she's ever written. But she really helped me kind of also be able to articulate that because sometimes I feel like it's important to name and see and fully, address it from many different points of view, and that some things coming out of my mouth are going to sound odd. And so it's really important for me to find people in the context of that reporting who are natives in the space and can tell it from that point of view. Just I can tell a lot of things from my point of view and it sounds perfectly normal. I could talk about roller derby until, the end of time. But I really didn't want this to be kind of like, oh, here's the white lady talking about, experience that people of color have. But at the same time, can't leave that out. So trying to find ways to tell those different stories. And over the years, I've been, lucky enough to also talk to like Chris Mosier, who, is a trans athlete who was on the U.S. men's cross country team, distance running team. And which kind of is that the counterpoint to so many of the prevailing narrative that we hear about trans athletes today. And so being able to kind of talk to people like that and get their point of view too, how it feels like to play sports in their bodies, and we as women, I think we have so many issues with our bodies. We're told they have to be one way. We see that they're not in ways that as we get older, we understand we're getting farther away from what that expectation is. Like all of these different things. And I just kind of felt like it was impossible to talk about why the US women's national team wasn't paid equitably without talking about what it means to play sports in a woman's body.
Yeah, it was. I read it like three different times because there were so many different perspectives, which I absolutely love. I just have to read this, listeners. Like, obviously, this is just another plug for the book, but it's so good. It says, "This is the Professor Davis. If you're white and heterosexual, you can present in damn near any way and get marketing campaigns. If you're white and gay, you can present in nearly any way and get marketing campaigns. If you're a black woman and femme presenting, you're marketable. But if you're a black woman and you are anything to the side of the spectrum of femme, then there's no kind of pathway for these same marketing opportunities that are coming with being the face of the league or brand partnerships." I mean, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, and yes. Is it changing? Is it getting better?
I mean, I certainly think people are sensitized to it.
Yeah,
Thankfully, WNBA and the players in the WNBA are kind of like, we don't want to we don't want to go along with this anymore, thanks.
yeah.
The players who are excellent deserve those contracts. And I think that is something we're seeing some movement on. But the reason it's so important is that athletes in women's sports, 82% of their annual earnings are from sponsorships and off the field opportunities. The balance of that is the salary, which is a tiny portion of what they're earning each year because revenue is not where it is for men's leagues. So salaries are not where they are for men's leagues. I mean, you can say equal pay until the cows come home, but each of these is their own independent little ecosystem. And salaries are a function of revenue. And so what it means is that players have to go outside of their salary structure in order to make actual money. And if you're making that really difficult for Black non-femme presenting women, then you're putting an undue burden on them. If you're not as a league trying to connect that group of quote unquote less marketable athletes with opportunities, then you're doing a disservice to your players as a whole. And so I think the WNBA is probably real aware of that because I think they've done a lot to try to make sure that it's not just the most femme presenting, young player out of college who's getting all of the marketing deals. Yeah, I mean, and I do think, it's like in men's sports, it's generally like, well, if you're excellent, you get more money. If you're
I
terrible, you don't get money. But
yeah.
in women's sports, it's different because women are still rewarded based on what is traditionally valued in femininity, which is looks and pleasingness, all of that. And so I think, if you want to turn the tables and do something radical, then that means looking those inequities in the face and trying to account for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's so this balance of first of all, it's impossible and it's disgusting that I'm supposed to go out there and be a warrior on the field and then come back and be like delicate, like the word delicate. Everyone's just like my least favorite word is moist. I'm like, mine's delicate. I just like I can't. It's and then the pressure on, whatever if you want to say like mask presenting black athletes, that they have to be undeniable. That word kept coming
Yeah.
up. I'm like, that is such a perfect way. They have to be undeniable to cash in, really. And then the example you gave about Serena Williams when she, when she was pregnant, people saw her in a whole different, oh, well, this is more acceptable because she's, less ferocious and less, her guns aren't out. Now she's more feminine and delicate. Now she's doing what women should be doing with having babies.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do think that that is completely radical because, of course, when Serena Williams started playing, the second you got married, you were forced to quit your sport. Like,
Yeah.
like you were only playing sports until your real job began, which was marriage and children. So the fact that in her lifetime, we went from being, you know, you have to quit to being able to have children and come back and play at a super high level. She made three finals, Grand Slam finals after she had Olympia. And, and a lot of people are like, oh, that's such a disappointment. And I suppose relative to her prior success, it certainly was. But you know what? If I
She
played
had a
tennis,
baby.
right. But that's the other thing is like
Yeah.
she had a really great run after she had Olympia. And
Yes.
so that's like, that's pretty, that's something that's really changed. Like when she came in, the expectation is you quit. And when she left, the expectation was that you continue to win the slams.
Yeah.
So so
Yes.
that's a real sea change in just, her career.
yeah, she comes back and makes every single final, and then the pressure, she's under is so because of course, and it was just like beyond a difficult childbirth, like the childbirth itself was
Yeah.
beyond difficult. But again, now she's just like also Allison Felix, like they're making all of these their stories like very public now, which is so freeing and so important. I mean, there's just, yeah, they're all national treasures. Okay, I kind of just want to talk about two quick things in the book that sort of where we're at now and where we're going. And this was in the conclusion, but Victoria Jackson, another rock star in this book,
Yeah.
she said, you have to have the political, cultural, and economic conditions. The mix of these three things have to be right. We're talking about the momentum in women's sports. Sorry, I should have caveated that.
Mm.
So the economy has to be good and thriving. There has to be like no economic anxiety. People have to feel optimistic about the forecasted economy going forward. You have to have political support in kind of all sorts of ways, whether that's traditional, actual politics, who's in the White House, and then the cultural piece where there's just widespread general public support around ideas of equity and inclusion. Um, oh, yeah, and then there's the other piece you just have to win. Now, I am absolutely a glass half full person. It's not bordering on toxic positivity, but it's getting close. And I read that and I was like, oh God, that's you know what I mean? Like where we're at right now, I'm still very hopeful and I'm gonna fight the good fight in every way I can on stage or this podcast or anything I do. But the conditions are not great right now for women's sports. And yet we have this like big tidal wave of investment and excitement. But that quote made me slightly disillusioned.
I think it's hard to project what's going to happen in this moment because just from what you read from Victoria Jackson, um, sh we are at a moment where the political mood is changing pretty significantly. The economic forecast is less certain. I think there's still, when it comes to women's sports, though, people still have the belief, particularly younger people, have the belief that women should be able to play. Not only women feel like it's their birthright, but so do their brothers, and that's different. When I teach and I see young people in my classes, um, I don't get a lot of, yeah, but why girls don't want to play sports? Like, that's not really an idea set that most young people that I've encountered believe anymore. And that's a fundamental difference. I see guys in my classroom who are Portland Thorns fans. One of my students got me some Thorns socks as a thank you after this semester. And so it's like so I think there's a fundamental difference with that. The conversation around women's sports is changing. I think people are taking advantage of some of the um, difference in thought around trans athletes to kind of exploit that to the detriment of women's sports as a category. So that is a bit concerning. But at the same time, I think, the momentum, the financial momentum, the people are showing up for these games. It's growing excitement. The WNBA is really climbing up the ranks in terms of our national sports and who watches what. So, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to kind of see how it all shakes out. I don't see, um, at the current moment, I mean, I would even say like even the political crosswinds, they aren't negative about women's sports as a category. They're trying to peel off a section of athletes and force them out. But it's not negative about women's sports. So that's an interesting
Mm.
difference. Um, but I'm curious as to how it will shake out. I think there are still lots of opportunities at this particular moment. I think people do see the value in it because, ratings are up, fans are showing up, people are showing out and getting the merch. Um, so I think that's what you have. And I also think that the category of women's sports is probably a bit of a refuge for people who feel under assault right now or who feel
Yeah.
like their ideas are not welcome. Like you go watch a Liberty game and, it's a lot different from, scrolling your timeline on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so, I mean, being at these events is so empowering. It's so joyful. I was at the Sparks game. It was like their pride game on Sunday. And you just like the world just like does not exist. And you're in this wonderful bubble of seeing everybody, pride game or not pride game, every game is a pride game. It's just so, yeah, it's fun and empowering. And that was, all right. So that was the last quote, which you already mentioned, which I just have to say, because this one actually made me very, very hopeful. Just to reiterate, you said, here's the thing about this generation. They know they deserve better. They also know they're worth more. 50 years ago, 50 years after the Virginia Slims tour in Title IX, sports are these girls' birthright as much as their brothers. And a lot of viewers agree, enough to build a new house, a better house. So I was like, all right, that made me feel really good.
Well, I think that's really, I think that's really true. And I don't think that the main point of that has actually been all that disruptive despite everything that's going on. And that's not to say that there's something, if Title IX, if somebody comes after Title IX in a real way, then that's going to feel like a more existential threat. And I, certainly leave open the possibility of that. And if that happens, then, that can people who have stake in it will address. Um, but beyond that, I think, people are going to still go to games, and you're exactly right. Like, you want to go celebrate and you want to go feel good about women's sports and equity and possibility and optimism, go see a game.
Yeah.
It's as simple as take your kids, take your friends, whatever. Just that is going to make you feel better about stuff. And so I think in some ways, women's sports are more important in this current moment because they do offer that acceptance, celebration, pride. It's not a bad word there. It's not
Yeah.
a bad word to go watch a game. And so I think that's important.
It is, if I could say one thing is the antidote for what's happening right now, it is absolutely women's sports. I mean, just going, yeah, when I see these games and I always see this little kids in jerseys, girls and boys, I just openly weep.
I know.
It's just so feel good. And yeah, we're now these kids now they're teenagers or 20s or even like 30s now. I sound like I'm 80, but like they are really like their mindset is just like we what? Like we're gonna do it. We deserve it. What do you mean? Like, yeah, I think they know their history,
A little bit.
but they just like full steam ahead. Like we're gonna do it our own way in a different way and capture this fan base. And it's, I don't know, the most exciting time that I've ever seen it in my lifetime anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think that's changed. I don't think that excitement has abated at all. And you know what? I came across you know how your iPhone tries to kill you by putting together like a selection of photos from way back when, every month or so, like they select new photos to make you cry or sad or reach out to somebody
My
or
God, the emotional roller coaster of an iPhone photo carousel is
I was just,
unbelievable.
why are you doing this to me? Like,
Yeah.
what is it? Like, what emotion are you trying to provoke from me?
Yeah.
Anyway, but one of those adorable little photos was, my now 22-year-old at a Liberty game back in, I think, like 2008, something like that, at Madison Square Garden, like where, we got those seats for a song. And,
Yeah.
and I was just I was thinking like, wow, things have changed so much. They went to the county center and then they came back and then, now they're at the Barclays. So like, but so much has changed in that period of time. But, I just remember thinking, it's great to have been able to see it and to have my, put my kids in that environment and they've seen it too, kind of come this far. So I feel good about that.
No, I mean it's awesome. I was in New York City in like 97 when when we'd go to the garden for
Yeah.
$8 and then we'd like go down and find whatever seat we could. And now it's like $70 a pop to even get like a bird's eye view of the court. And I'm like, listen, I'll pay. I
Yeah,
mean, I should
exactly.
get a discount because I've been there since day one. There should be a day one discount now that I'm saying this out loud, like an OG discount for all of these sports. But yeah, no, it's so exciting. Okay, a little bit of a like a random pivot. I have you for at least 12 more minutes contractually. Um, the roller derby. Okay, there's a couple things also about the book that I love because I was like introduced to like new books, new authors, professors that I want to gently stalk online. My sister's a professor, so I'm always like, I love professors. Um, well, obviously yourself as well. But also pieces of like personal information about you popped up, and I was like, okay, roller derby.
Yeah.
It like blew my mind. Um, just tell me, I know we don't have a lot of time, but like it's just it doesn't listen, just to blow sunshine up your ass. It doesn't surprise me because when I met you, I tried to be cool because I was like, I know who you are. I've been reading your columns since day one. But you were also just so fun and easy to talk to, which I really appreciated. I didn't know anyone in that ESPN suite. I was like, hi, I'm Erin. They're like, who the fuck is this one? But roller derby is just naturally cool. We go see LA Derby dolls from time to
Yes.
time. So tell me how you got involved in that.
Yeah. So I went to go cover this. I can like in the early 2000s, there was a team playing in Connecticut, and I was working at a paper in New York, and I found like two women on the team that were from the area that I covered, and I was like, oh, we've got to go do this. Look, there's a local angle. And back then, everybody was like local, 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 and so they're like, okay, okay. So I go and I cover. I remember I walked into a practice, and I was like, this is for me. This is my next sport. This is what I'm doing. These are my people. Like I literally just remembered like I am home now. It's, it's all happening. But I didn't want to I had two young kids. My kids were 3 and 5 at the time. And for you who don't know, that is a very large that's a busy time. You've got they can't feed themselves. They're not really clear on tying, shoelaces. The bathroom can be hit or miss. It just depends on what's happening on a given day. But I was like, if you guys come to New York, let me know. I'm there. Anyway, about 6 months later, they're like, guess what? We're starting a league in New York. And I was like, okay, well, that's it. I said I was going to be there. So my husband likes to play tennis. And so I was like, look, you know how you play tennis? I play roller derby now. So anyway, so I joined and, it was like everything. It's like, speaking of like presenting yourself the way you want to, like, back in that time, like it was booty shorts and fishnets. But if you didn't like that, you didn't have to wear that. You could wear something else. I remember we had a bout where it was like killers versus prom queens. And so the killers all dressed like serial killers from the movies. So like somebody was Jason and like all of that. And the prom queens, literally, you had to wear a prom dress. And so, and skating and about like a full contact sport. It was hilarious. Like all of these things. We would just like, it was fun. And and I just had dinner last week with like four of my absolute best friends from my team, and we haven't played for 10 years now. But it's like it's a great sport. It's full contact, and the best thing about it is like it's all women, and so like the ethos of it is like women who played sports mostly, although some were like skaters or some were like not play didn't play sports. They were conscientious objectors when they were younger from sports because they didn't want to be part of the sports monoculture, but they were athletes, and I think that's
Mm.
a huge distinction. And I think maybe that's where I started thinking about things like, you can be an athlete without wanting to participate in the monoculture of it all. And I think sometimes like when I talk to women and they're like, oh, I'm not really athletic. And then, lo and behold, you found out that they started for the lacrosse team in high school every year,
Yeah.
and you're like, why is it that you don't feel like you're an athlete when clearly you grew up as an athlete playing sports and maybe you do something, or I'm not an athlete, but I run triathlons or,
And you're like,
whatever it is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. My twin
Right.
sister's a marathon runner. She's like, I'm not athletic. I'm like, you've run three marathons. Like,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
You got to claim your inner athlete. And that's kind of where I was like, really, I mean, as I was a basketball player, but I didn't play organized basketball. I played a lot of pickup. I did play a little organized basketball, but I wasn't even D3, but I loved it. But I loved it was everything who I was. But I didn't necessarily, because I wasn't a football player who started at, Ohio State. Somehow I didn't think that, the moniker could apply to me. I just think it's really time to expand the way that we look at athletes. And roller derby really did that for me because any player, you can be the tiniest, the biggest, if you can skate, there's a place for you in a roller derby team. And I just felt like it was so inclusive, and that was really and fabulous for my kids to go and like sit on the sideline, really hang out with they were like a little pack of kids of the roller derby moms. They would just like, it was like a whirling dervish. It'd be like, where's the kid pack? And they, who knows what nonsense they're getting up to. But it was a really good, I played for 7 years and wouldn't take a second of it back. It was fantastic.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Please tell everybody what your name was. My favorite part of roller derby are the names. I mean, but your name in particular is pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I loved Leslie Visser and everything that she did for CBS, and as a sideline reporter and as a writer at the Boston Globe. And so my name was Leslie E. Visserate. And I cleared it with her first because I didn't want it to be like she found out what was happening and being like, "What? What have you done to my name?" Um, but yeah, she loved it. She had for a while she had a screensaver on her computer, which was a picture of me, just the with the back of my jersey, Visserate, because it was E dot Visserate. Um, anyway, yeah, I loved it. I loved it. So many great names. One of my good friends was Rita Wayward. Um, Jerry Flinger was, another like just
It's so
Eleanor
good.
Eleanor Roosevelt, Harlot Bronte.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
so
Good name.
good. It is. It's so many things packed into a sport that it's like badass, it's punk rock, it's super athleticism, it's comedy, it's all of it. It's so I absolutely love it. I was one of my favorite comedy clubs is in Bloomington, Indiana. The state of Indiana, not so much, but Bloomington, yes. Because we have a university in Indiana. And they have a fantastic roller derby team. Oh God, take those words out of my mouth. Edit. And I went to see I had two of them on the podcast. We did a live podcast. This was like 10 years ago. And I went to see them, I went to see and the whole thing is just so infectious and it just attracts really cool, badass people. Like, I just loved everything about it. I have to say one thing. I feel like I owe Leslie Visser an apology. I mean, I don't know her. I'm a huge fan. But I wasn't back in the day because it wasn't even about her. But when I would get so aggravated that women weren't allowed to do more than sideline weather reports and sideline injury reports that I took it out on Leslie Visser. And I have a
Yeah.
joke in my act like, she's out there, not her specifically, but like she was the model for the joke of just like they're in their, fur coat and their makeup and they're like, well, it's 10 degrees outside and I think that guy has an injury, blah, blah, blah. And then when grew up and started really learning about the systems,
Yes.
I realized what a badass she is and what a pioneer she is. And she was doing whatever she possibly could at the time that was, relegated this much space for women especially in football. But I'm almost ashamed that I modeled the joke. It was born out of frustration that women couldn't do more than what she was allowed to do.
Well, because you don't know the names of the producers who were telling her that she
Yeah.
could only do what she was doing. Like
Yeah.
those folks, those guys, they
Yeah.
never get, they don't get the name. They don't get names. You don't know what they're doing. But she absolutely was a pioneer. She endured a lot of stuff. And
Oh,
you know what? She's still like the most positive person. Like that's the thing is like if you're really going to do something like that, if you're going to break a ceiling, if you're going to stick with it for like 30 years, you have to have a special personality because it drives a lot of people out of the business. It is really hard. You're like, I'll just go be an accountant, thanks. I don't need this anymore, And she really stuck with it. And she was, a visible, I don't know that I mean, I didn't even know you could be a sports reporter. I didn't know that. And that's why it took me so long. I was 29 or 28 when I got my first full-time job in sports writing because I just didn't even know you could do it. And she was the only reason I knew you could do TV, because she was out there doing it. And thank God she stuck with it. But yeah, I think honestly, like you could do that bit now in some ways because, there are more women as analysts and there are, but boy, are we typecast
oh,
still to this
it's
day.
awful. Yeah. But now I can see it from the larger scope. Well, not now,
Yeah.
for the last, X amount of years. But when I was like early 20s, like I couldn't handle how it was just weather and
Yeah.
injury. To this day, it's weather and injury. I mean, also, you know what I mean? It's so and you've got Mina Kimes, but uh it's there's so many women that know so much more that still feel so restricted. And I'm just
100%.
hoping that because of social media and YouTube, like that we find a way of, I think traditional broadcasting is like, I don't know when is that going to change? I don't know. So it's like but also that mirrors like women and culture. It's like you have to find a way around because there is no, the path is blocked by douchebag, not all men, but men at every corner. So we got to find a way.
That's a great idea, but we're going to take the resources and we're going to need to do something else with them. We'd love to help you gals out. You're so good. You do such a good job. Unfortunately, you're all fired.
Yeah.
We just don't have room for you in the budget. I mean, honestly, like, why don't, Shanae Gumake and Elle Duncan and Drea Carter, why don't they have a show? Why don't they have a show where they're just talking about women's sports? Like, they
Every
are
day.
magic.
Yeah,
Yeah, every
they're
day.
absolute
Why not?
magic.
Why is that not there? Maybe they haven't thought about it at ESPN, or
Oh,
maybe there are other reasons. Maybe there are other reasons. But the revenue model is broken for cable right now, and they're consolidating audience. They're not trying to expand it. It's foolish because the reason the NFL does so well is because 48% of that audience is women. You cannot be a monolith unless you have women in the audience, and the NFL has kind of cracked that code. But there are a lot of other sports that are kind of re-entrenching in their we are sports for men model.
yeah. Well, one day I will meet Leslie Visser. I'm not going to tell her that story, but I will hug her and just say thank you. As I'm saying thank you to you, you are a national treasure. You have been in the trenches reporting on sports since day one. And the book, I will be plugging it for the rest of my life. And what I just appreciated about this book, it was just so informative. And it checked every box, but it was just so easy and fun to read, which just congratulations. It was awesome.
Thank you. Support women's sports by going to games, buying books, proving people that you're part of the market. I mean, it really is, it can't be discounted what that means. Watch it on TV, care about it, and then yeah, that's super helpful. By the way, like it has been lovely getting to listen to your stand up also. Like I have laughed so hard as I've stalked you online, just so you know, since we had that fabulous weekend at the Final Four. No, it's been a ton of fun, and I am totally going to go watch you do stand up. And so when you see me in the audience, laughing so hard that I pee, no, that's me.
Jane McManus, everybody. I mean, listen, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I don't think I steered you wrong in any way in the intro. She's an absolute rock star. And then on top of it, she played roller derby. I mean, how cool is that? I can't. I love it. And I'm so excited to see her at my show. So everyone go to the City Winery July 1st. Also, just check out my website, erinkfoley.com, because I'm on the road quite a bit. I'm going to be in Rehoboth. I'm going to be in New York. I'm going to be in DC. I'm opening up for Fortune in the fall. All the dates are on erinkfoley.com. That is our show, Her Lights. I will link to the book. I will put a link to the book in the show notes. Check out all my shows at erinkfoley.com. Spread the good word of Her Lights. Go on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get Her Lights. 5-star review. Please leave a comment. I need a lot more. So that's your homework assignment this week. I think that is everything. I miss you all out there. Happy summer, happy pride, happy all of it. Fans, friends, family, have the best week of your life.